Ethan Parker had always been the quiet type, the kind of person who observed more than he participated. He often wandered through his small college town with a thoughtful expression, notebook in hand, jotting down snippets of conversations or fragments of his daydreams. His life was orderly, predictable, and, in a way, comfortably dull. But beneath that calm exterior, a restless curiosity simmered, an urge to experience something out of the ordinary, to see life from a different perspective. It was a Friday afternoon when Liam Matthews, his closest friend since freshman year, texted him with an invitation that would unsettle that routine. "Hey, Ethan. Want to come over? My uncle's back in town, he's eager to meet you. Trust me, it'll be interesting." The message was casual, but the way Liam phrased it carried an unusual weight, a hint of something unsaid. Ethan hesitated for a moment, running through the possibilities in his head. He knew Liam's uncle was known in town for his charm and charisma, often leaving people captivated, sometimes unsettled. There was a thrill in the unknown, and against his better judgment, curiosity won. By the time Ethan arrived at Liam's house, the sun was low, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns of the neighborhood. Liam greeted him at the door with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're just in time," he said, ushering Ethan inside. The house smelled faintly of sandalwood and polished wood, a subtle elegance that hinted at the life within. "Uncle Victor will be down in a minute," Liam said, leading Ethan to the living room. "You'll like him. He has a way of making people feel seen." There was a pause, an almost imperceptible hesitation in Liam's voice, but Ethan didn't notice. His attention was drawn to the faint hum of anticipation in the air, the feeling that something significant was about to happen. Victor Matthews arrived shortly after, descending the staircase with an effortless grace. Ethan noticed immediately how striking he was, tall, well-groomed, with eyes that seemed to catch and hold light in a way that was almost disarming. Victor extended his hand, and the moment their fingers touched, Ethan felt a curious mixture of nervousness and fascination. "Ethan, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," Victor said, his voice smooth, rich, carrying a warmth that was almost magnetic. "Liam has told me quite a bit about you." There was no flattery in the words, only a calm confidence that made Ethan both self-conscious and oddly reassured. They sat together in the living room, the conversation flowing easily at first, small talk about classes, hometowns, and interests. But Victor had a way of probing gently, asking questions that seemed casual but struck directly at Ethan's thoughts and insecurities. "What's been on your mind lately?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. "I can tell there's something you're wrestling with." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. No one had ever asked him that before, not with genuine curiosity. I guess I just feel like I'm in a rut," he admitted. "Like everyone else is moving forward, and I'm stuck." His voice was quieter than he intended, betraying a vulnerability he usually kept hidden. Victor nodded thoughtfully, eyes never leaving Ethan's. "Feeling stuck is different from being stagnant," he said softly. "Sometimes, you just need a different perspective to see the path you've been missing." There was an intensity in his gaze that made Ethan shift slightly in his seat. He wasn't used to being seen like this, and it was both exhilarating and unnerving. As the conversation continued, Victor shared stories from his own life, tales of risks taken, mistakes made, and lessons learned. Ethan found himself listening intently, drawn not just to the words but to the way Victor spoke, the subtle confidence that seemed to make the room itself lean in closer. There was a magnetism there, undeniable and disarming. At some point, the conversation veered toward the unexpected. Victor asked about Liam, about their friendship, and Ethan found himself speaking more freely than he had with anyone in years. "Liam and I have been friends for a long time," he said. "I trust him, but sometimes I feel like there's so much I don't say to anyone." Victor's expression softened, a knowing smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "That's the interesting thing about trust," Victor said. "It isn't always about who you talk to, but who listens, and understands." The word struck a chord in Ethan, stirring something he didn't fully recognize. He felt seen, understood in a way that was startling. The warmth in Victor's presence was something Ethan hadn't expected to encounter, and it made the air between them feel charged, almost fragile. "Liam, seemingly oblivious to the subtle tension, excused himself to take a call, leaving Ethan and Victor alone in the living room. The quiet that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Victor leaned back, studying Ethan with a calm intensity. "Sometimes," he said, "the moments that change us are the ones we don't see coming. You never know which encounters will leave a mark on your life." Ethan nodded, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension rising in him. There was something about Victor, his confidence, his attention, his ability to make Ethan feel both small and significant, that made the afternoon feel suspended in time. For the first time, he sensed that stepping into the unknown might not just be thrilling, but transformative. As the sky outside deepened into twilight, Victor stood, stretching casually. "Ethan, I'd like to show you something," he said, his tone light but with an edge of intrigue. "It's just a little project I've been working on at home. It's unusual, but I think you might appreciate it." Ethan hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing his mind. Liam's warning echoed faintly, a shadow in the back of his thoughts, but the pull of curiosity was stronger. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Victor smiled, a faint, knowing curve of his lips. "Good. Let's go, then." As they moved deeper into the house, the sense of anticipation wrapped around Ethan like a tangible thread, tugging him forward into a world he didn't yet understand. Something had shifted, subtly, irrevocably. And for Ethan, nothing would ever feel entirely the same again. Ethan followed Victor down a narrow hallway, the soft carpet muffling their footsteps. The house was quiet, almost unnervingly so, with only the faint hum of an air conditioner and the muted creak of floorboards filling the space. Ethan felt a flutter in his chest, part curiosity, part unease, as Victor led him to a small room at the back of the house. "This is where I spend most of my time when I need to think," Victor said, gesturing toward a study filled with bookshelves, scattered notebooks, and the faint scent of old paper. "I like to surround myself with ideas, perspectives, things that challenge the mind." He moved with a fluid grace, his confidence filling the room in a way that made Ethan feel both out of place and oddly welcome. Ethan took a hesitant step inside. "It's impressive," he admitted, trying to steady the nervous energy in his voice. The room had a warmth to it, a mixture of intellect and personal charm, and he couldn't help but feel that every object had a story, every corner a memory. Victor smiled, as though reading Ethan's thoughts. "It's not about impressing anyone," he said. "It's about creating a space where you can be honest with yourself." He leaned against a desk, folding his arms, and Ethan noticed how natural and unassuming he appeared, despite the aura of control that seemed to radiate from him. For a moment, they sat in silence, the quiet stretching comfortably between them. Then Victor spoke, his voice gentle, probing. "Tell me, Ethan, what do you really want from life? Not what others expect from you, but what you want." Ethan hesitated, his fingers brushing against the edge of a notebook on the desk. It was such a simple question, yet it made him pause. He realized that no one had asked him that in years, and the weight of it pressed on him. I don't know," he admitted finally. "I guess I want to feel alive. Like I'm actually living, not just going through the motions." Victor nodded thoughtfully, as though he had expected no other answer. "That's a good start," he said. "Acknowledging that is the first step towards something more meaningful. Sometimes, it's not about finding the right path immediately, but about being willing to explore the unknown." There was an intensity in Victor's gaze, an unspoken challenge that made Ethan shift slightly. He felt drawn to the elder man's confidence, the calm certainty in his words, and yet a flicker of doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Liam. What would Liam think if he knew how close he was becoming to his uncle? The thought made Ethan's chest tighten, a confusing mixture of guilt and intrigue settling over him. Victor seemed to notice the hesitation. "It's normal to feel conflicted," he said quietly. "When something is new, exciting, or different, it can stir emotions you didn't expect. That doesn't make it wrong. It makes it human." Ethan listened, captivated, feeling a rare openness emerge inside him. He began to share small things about his life, little frustrations and insecurities he hadn't voiced to anyone. Victor listened intently, never interrupting, always responding in a way that made Ethan feel understood. There was a subtle intimacy in their exchange, a connection that was hard to define yet impossible to ignore. As the afternoon faded, Victor suggested they take a walk outside, into the small garden behind the house. The evening air was cool, carrying the faint scent of jasmine, and the fading sunlight painted long shadows across the lawn. Walking side by side, Victor spoke of experiences from his past, moments of risk, of curiosity, of lessons learned in unexpected ways. Ethan found himself drawn in, imagining what it might be like to embrace such freedom, such courage. You know, Victor said, glancing at him, most people are afraid of the unknown. But sometimes, the things we fear the most are exactly what we need to experience. Ethan nodded, feeling the truth in the words resonate with a quiet force. He wondered how much of his life he had missed by staying safe, predictable, and unseen. There was a pause, a silence that carried weight. Victor looked at him, not as an elder to a younger man, but almost like a guide to someone on the edge of discovery. "Ethan, you're at a point where choices matter," he said softly. "The decisions you make now will shape the person you become. And sometimes, it's not the grand gestures, but the small moments that change everything." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine, a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. There was something in Victor's presence that made time feel suspended, every word charged with significance. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt alive in a way that was thrilling and unsettling all at once. They returned to the house, and Victor invited Ethan to sit by the window, where the last rays of sunlight were slipping beneath the horizon. The room was dim, the soft shadows creating an atmosphere of quiet intimacy. Victor began to show Ethan some of his personal projects, sketches, notes, and ideas he had been developing. Ethan watched, fascinated, and found himself asking questions he hadn't even thought to ask before. Victor's responses were patient, thoughtful, and occasionally teasing in a way that made Ethan laugh nervously. The laughter felt liberating, a rare release from the tension that had held him captive for so long. And yet, beneath it, Ethan sensed an undercurrent, an unspoken tension, a subtle challenge, a feeling that something was shifting between them. As the night settled in, Victor finally stood, stretching lightly. "I hope you enjoyed today, Ethan," he said, his tone casual but with an edge of significance. "These are the moments that linger. The moments that plant seeds you didn't even know you were ready to grow." Ethan nodded, words failing him. He realized that what had begun as a simple visit had turned into something far more complex, an emotional experience that left him exhilarated and unsettled in equal measure. The weight of his own curiosity, his attraction to Victor's guidance and presence, pressed on him, both thrilling and terrifying. When Liam returned, oblivious to the subtle tension, Ethan felt a pang of guilt mixed with longing. He smiled, nodded, and spoke casually, but inside, he knew that nothing about today would be easily forgotten. Something had changed within him, and as he left the house that night, the streets of his quiet town felt different, charged with possibility and uncertainty. Victor's words echoed in his mind, lingering like the faint glow of the setting sun. "The choices you make now will shape the person you become. And sometimes, the things you fear the most are exactly what you need to experience." Ethan didn't yet know what lay ahead, but he sensed that stepping into the unknown with Victor was just the beginning, and that nothing would ever feel entirely the same again. The days following Ethan's visit to Victor's house were strange, heavy with a quiet tension he couldn't shake. His routines felt altered, even mundane things, a walk to class, a conversation with a classmate, the hum of his morning coffee, carried a subtle weight. Every time he thought of Victor, a mix of curiosity, admiration, and guilt surged through him, leaving him restless. He found himself replaying their conversations in his mind, analyzing every word, every glance, every small gesture. One evening, Liam texted him casually, unaware of the internal storm raging within his friend. "Hey, want to come over tomorrow? Uncle Victor said he's got something new to show you." Ethan stared at the screen, heart pounding. The invitation thrilled him and terrified him in equal measure. He knew that returning would deepen the connection he already felt, but he also knew that his loyalty to Liam and the boundaries of friendship were at stake. After a long pause, he typed back a simple, hesitant, sure. The next day, Ethan found himself walking toward the Matthews house, each step heavier than the last. The sun was higher in the sky now, casting sharp shadows across the familiar street, but his mind was elsewhere. What would happen today? What if this connection with Victor crossed lines he wasn't ready to navigate? And yet, he couldn't deny the pull, the magnetic curiosity that had drawn him in before. Victor greeted him with his usual calm confidence, a subtle smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I have something I'd like to share with you, something I think you'll find enlightening." There was a pause, a deliberate emphasis that made Ethan's chest tighten. The way Victor looked at him was not just attentive but probing, as if reading the thoughts he didn't dare voice aloud. They settled into the study, surrounded by books and sketches, and Victor began sharing ideas, theories, and personal reflections. Ethan listened intently, captivated, but also wary. He felt the emotional tension growing, the unspoken connection between them deepening with every shared thought. It was intoxicating, a mixture of admiration and desire for understanding, and he knew that the line he was crossing was not one of physicality but of emotional intimacy. As the afternoon wore on, Victor leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on Ethan. "You're perceptive," he said quietly. "You notice things most people overlook. But there's more inside you than even you realize. You just need the courage to face it." Ethan felt his heart quicken. Victor's words were flattering, but there was an undercurrent, something that hinted at a challenge, a subtle test of his resolve. Ethan found himself speaking more freely than ever before. He shared fears he had never admitted to anyone, the anxiety of being unnoticed, the yearning for approval, the craving for something beyond the predictable routine of his life. Victor listened patiently, his responses carefully measured, never judgmental, always encouraging. And the more Ethan spoke, the more he felt the fragile bond between them strengthen, but the bond came with a shadow. In quiet moments, Ethan's mind drifted to Liam. What would his friend think if he knew how deeply he was confiding in Victor? The thought brought a pang of guilt, a reminder that his curiosity and admiration were treading into morally ambiguous territory. He recognized the signs of emotional infidelity, the shift of loyalty, the clandestine admiration, the quiet exhilaration of being seen in a way that no one else understood. It was during one of those reflective pauses that Victor spoke again, softer this time. "Ethan, sometimes we meet people who challenge our understanding of ourselves. It's natural to feel conflicted about it. What matters is how we respond to that feeling." Ethan looked up, catching the earnestness in Victor's eyes. He felt the pull of trust, the magnetic draw of emotional connection, but also the weight of responsibility pressing on his chest. Later, Liam returned home, unaware of the internal tension between his uncle and friend. Ethan greeted him with a smile, careful to keep his emotions in check, to maintain the facade of casual friendship. Liam chattered about his day, oblivious to the quiet storm swirling in Ethan's mind. And yet, every glance Victor cast in Ethan's direction seemed to linger a fraction too long, a subtle reminder of the emotional entanglement that had quietly taken root. As the evening drew on, Victor stood and gestured toward the hallway. "Ethan, before you leave, there's something important I want to show you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He followed him, anticipation and apprehension mixing in equal measure. In the dim light of the corridor, Victor paused, turning to face him fully. "You have a remarkable mind," Victor said, his voice steady, deliberate. "And I've enjoyed seeing it unfold. But I need you to understand something: admiration, curiosity, and emotional connection are powerful. They can illuminate our lives, or they can lead us astray if we're not mindful." Ethan swallowed hard, realizing the weight of Victor's words. It was a warning, yes, but also an acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them. He felt a mixture of gratitude and fear. The connection he had with Victor had opened a door inside himself he hadn't known existed, but it was also a door that, once opened, could change everything. Victor's gaze softened, and he offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. "You have a choice, Ethan. What you do with what you feel, what you think, and how you act, it will shape not just your life, but the lives of those around you." Be mindful. Be brave. And above all, be honest with yourself. Ethan nodded, words failing him, but the message resonated deeply. He felt the gravity of the moment settle into his chest. There was a lesson here, a test of character, and he understood that the experiences he had shared with Victor were not just fleeting encounters, they were mirrors reflecting his own potential, his own fears, and his own moral compass. When he finally left the Matthews house that night, the street seemed both familiar and strange, as if he had crossed an invisible threshold. The pull of curiosity and emotional intensity lingered, but so did the awareness of boundaries, of loyalty, of the consequences of choices made in the heart and mind. Ethan walked home slowly, reflecting on the days that had passed, the conversations, the subtle gestures, the emotional resonance. He realized that Victor had challenged him not just to think, but to feel deeply, to confront emotions he had long suppressed. And while the path forward remained uncertain, one thing was clear: he had been changed, irrevocably, by the encounter. In the quiet of his room that night, Ethan sat by the window, staring at the city lights and thinking about the lessons learned. Emotional bonds, he understood now, were just as powerful as any other connection. And the choices he made, the way he navigated loyalty, curiosity, and admiration, would define not just his relationships, but who he would become. As sleep finally claimed him, a faint smile touched his lips, not of certainty, but of understanding. Life had shifted in subtle, profound ways, and Ethan Parker knew that the journey he had begun was only just beginning. The unknown lay ahead, charged with possibility, suspense, and the quiet thrill of discovery.